just real horny over there to talk about Sam Darnold. Anyway.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here with the one, the only, the D.O.N. I'm here with Don Chrisman. Don, how's it going, dude?
Yo, man. Nothing wets my whistle more for the first podcast for me this season than the AFC East, dude. Can't wait.
Yeah, dude. You love talking about the Jets more than anything else in your entire life. That's one thing I know about you.
Massive turn on.
Yeah, for sure. Just real horny over there to talk about Sam Darnold. Anyway, guys, it's me and Don. We're here. We're pumped. We're doing the AFC East. This will be part one of the AFC East podcast. Today we are going to cover the New York Jets and the New England Patriots. So the two teams, I guess, I was going to say with the most stability, but that's not true at all. The Jets have like a brand new front office and head coaching situation. So that would just be a really dumb thing to say. Anyway, we're going to cover the Jets and the Patriots. It's going to be sweet. Next week we'll be doing the AFC North, but for this week, keep an eye out for part two coming at you later. And if you haven't listened, Shrek and Vanny covered the NFC East in detail last week, so definitely check that out if you need your news and notes on all those NFC East teams. Don, you got anything else, or should we just jump right into it?
Yeah, man. I think that real quick, if you did listen to Vinny and Shrek, they kind of like talked about our duo and our dynamic, and I feel like Shrek like laid out this like love-hate relationship. It's all love here with me and Walsh. I mean, on a social aspect, Walsh can't tolerate me until he's drunk, and then he has a real deep appreciation for me. That's
true.
But on a podcast level, man, we have a great time. So look forward to a lot of love and AFC East good stuff over here.
Yeah, absolutely. It is all love on the podcast. There was at Shrek's bachelor party earlier this year, there was a specific quote where at a certain point in the day, I started laughing at something you said and said, Don, I'm drunk enough to find you funny again. So in real life, our dynamic is slightly different, but it works out all right. And hopefully that shines through in the podcast. All right, let's jump into it with the Jets here. I mentioned it before, but we got some big picture changes here. Todd Bowles out as the head coach. Adam Gase comes in as the new head coach. Bit of a weird hire in a lot of people's eyes. He is going to install his own offensive system. And then he also managed to run the GM out of town before the season started, but after all of the offseason acquisitions and departures were made, which is a bizarre time for the GM to leave. So a bit of turmoil here. What's your opinion on Adam Gase as a coach and just sort of the status of the New York Jets as a whole here?
Yeah, so I don't know what my take is for him with the New York Jets yet, but obviously you heard me and maybe all of us bitch about it, but me, I know Vinny, we bitch about Adam Gase a lot on the podcast last year with everything that he did with Miami and all the potential that we were really looking forward to a Miami team last year. And there was just no stability for a fantasy standpoint. He obviously had a very strong ego where it came to hinder you for like a Devontae Parker or anybody else on that team. So you really didn't know where to go. It was very frustrating. Or if you owned Kenyon Drake, stuff like that. So I think in a sense there's going to be different players than there were on a Miami team with there's more talent like a Le'Veon Bell. Sam Darnold's the clear-cut quarterback. They got some, Jamison Crowder is their definite, like their slot position wide receiver. So there's going to be a little bit more definites, but there's still also a lot of questions with Adam Gase and the whole new organization as itself as the Jets.
Yeah, absolutely. Shrek and I touched on it on the initial, the comeback podcast for the year, but I want to love the Jets this year because Sam Darnold finished the season red hot. Robbie Anderson was a monster. They brought in Le'Veon Bell. Chris Herndon's going into his second year and was productive as a first-year tight end, which rarely ever happens. But just like you said, Adam Gase was the devil for fantasy last year. Like, people produced on Miami, but you couldn't predict it. You never knew who it was going to be. It would come off of like 2 touches, and like Albert Wilson would get 2 touchdowns off of like, two catches for like 100 yards, it was just bizarre. And I'm afraid of that with the Jets, which is a shame because there's so many guys to really want to sink your teeth into here.
You can't even forget Quincy Enunwa either, which we'll hit too, but there's just a lot of depth. It really is.
There's a lot of guys who have been fantasy relevant guys in past years and have a chance to as well this year. We'll start with Darnold. Darnold is currently going the 4th pick in the 14th round. Oh, before we get into these, all of these ADPs are from Fantasy Football Calculator. They are 12-team PPR ADPs. So Sam Darnold, 4th pick in the 14th round, currently quarterback 24. What do you think about that price and just Sam Darnold in general? Are you buying that he's going to take another step and maybe continue where he left off at the end of last year?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to beat a dead horse with it too. Obviously, if you've listened to us, we're all very off quarterbacks in general. Walsh, you've actually proven, especially in our league, which is a pretty intense league, and none of us are high on quarterbacks, but you especially, you've shown back-to-back championships with pretty much streaming quarterbacks, which not many people are comfortable with doing, but you've shown that you can be very successful with just literally streaming weekly quarterbacks, not like a few weeks here or there on matchups and playing 1 or 2 quarterbacks, but actually streaming. So, and this year you probably got to be excited because this is probably the most depth for quarterbacks in a while. So Sam Darnold at that point is fine. I think Sam Darnold as a football player is good and he's going to be better this year. But as for drafting, I mean, obviously we're someone that we don't even want you reaching for the top 10 quarterbacks. So to reach for Sam Darnold, I don't think he's someone that needs to be drafted, but can be a plug and play if you're going to stream like Walsh normally does.
Yeah, he's a guy who like you could draft at the end. Like he's a guy who will be on the wire at certain points during the year, more likely than not. So I think he's a great streaming option. I do think there's a chance he really takes that step forward because the last 7 or so weeks of the season were just unbelievable for him. He was great. That game that you guys were at, that Packers-Jets game was he put on a fucking awesome show.
It was a Rodgers-Darnold showdown.
Yeah, crazy. With no stakes whatsoever. Both teams just out of it.
Just slinging pig all day on both sides.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward with Darnold. If you really do have some sort of inkling or if you're very high on him, like I don't like pretty much past the 10th round or like once you're into like the teens in terms of quarterbacks, like take the guys you like, if you really like Sam Darnold, like take him there. It's fine. There's no real risk against it.
Listen, obviously there's upside, right? We're talking about, we don't know what the organization is going to do in Adam Gase, but the upside is there. Sam Darnold has shown that he is going to be a good talent. We believe he's going to improve, but he also has a lot of weapons around him. He has 3 to 4 good receivers because you're including his tight end Herndon. And then also he has Le'Veon Bell, who's a pass catching back and is Le'Veon Bell. So there's a lot going his way.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Le'Veon Bell, let's move right on to that running back position with Bell. He is currently going the 10th pick in the first round. That is running back 7. So for a little bit of perspective, going behind obviously the big 4 and then David Johnson and Melvin Gordon, going just ahead of guys like Joe Mixon, James Conner, Dalvin Cook, Todd Gurley, Damian Williams, etc. So do you like this value for Le'Veon Bell, and what do you really see him doing in a Jets uniform?
So actually, Walsh, was one of the things I wanted to ask you on this podcast because you did touch this with Walsh on the Comeback Cast, and this was something you talked about. And I want you to kind of explain to the listeners more about your thoughts with Le'Veon Bell because you said it's almost a little too rich for your blood. Like you would take a James Conner before Le'Veon Bell, so you would obviously take all those guys ahead of him, which is obviously Barkley, Elliott, Kamara, McCaffrey, Johnson, Melvin Gordon, even a Joe Mixon before Lev Bell.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're nitpicking at this point in June, but for me, Le'Veon Bell is behind Joe Mixon and James Conner. I don't think I would go as far as putting him behind Dalvin Cook or Todd Gurley or any of those guys. But the reasoning for that is I just think there's a lot more risk in a situation where your first round pick, you really don't want to expose yourself to too much risk. Joe Mixon is in an established situation with a team that whether you're high on the Bengals or not, you know that Joe Mixon is sort of an ascending running back who is coming off of a very good year and is now in the same situation. James Conner is in Pittsburgh in a situation where we know the Pittsburgh running back has been one of the most fantasy-friendly positions in football for years. So, we saw what he did last year. He had just as good of a fantasy season as Le'Veon Bell generally has had in the past. And he's in the same exact situation. So to me, Le'Veon Bell he presents risk because, one, he was out of football for the entire year. Two, he's with a new team. He's the head coach supposedly didn't want to pay him as much money as they actually gave him. So there's a little bit of drama there. And to me, it just doesn't make sense to expose myself to that kind of risk when I have guys who I think are more of a sure thing in Mixon and Connor available on the board.
Okay. I'm going to play a little bit devil's advocate, and I think that's very fair, especially because he's in the Jets. But here's one thing I'll say too, or two things really. One is Le'Veon Bell is a universal player. It's not like he is some scrub. Like this guy, no matter where he is, you could pretty much plug and play him anywhere. I think he's also going to bail out the Jets a lot too when they need to. They're just going to run him, throw him in all different formations. He's going to be catching a lot of passes from Sam Darnold. On top of that, though, you got to remember too, David Johnson, right? He was out for a year too, but not because he decided to rest himself, but because he was actually injured. And then he came back and had a mediocre year last year, but he's going number 5, and Arizona's not that great either. So Le'Veon Bell, man, and we've obviously seen it year after year that he's played, that he's really a top, 1 to 3 back in general. So even if it's the Jets, he took a year off to rest and make more money, which he didn't. But it's not like he's coming off injury. So with Lev Bell, man, I like Lev Bell better than David Johnson. I like Lev Bell better than Joe Mixon, who has an injury history, and he is on the Bengals. So, I mean, you could split hairs with him and James Conner. I think if you took James Conner over Lev Bell, there's no problem. James Conner is great. Like you said, Pittsburgh's a very friendly running back team, and James Conner has proved himself already. But Le'Veon Bell at that point, I think if you can be the 8th pick and grab a Lev Bell and then swing around and get another RB, I think you're going to get actually really good value, and it's going to pan out for you.
You make a ton of great points. And I will say this, I think there is a much higher chance of Le'Veon Bell finishing as like the RB1 than Joe Mixon or James Conner, for example. I think Le'Veon Bell has all the upside in the world. You're completely correct. He's insanely talented. He didn't have an injury. He has a ton of upside. The Jets coaching staff worries me. It worries
absolutely.
me a ton. So that's my thinking there, but I completely understand yours as well. In terms of his backups, none of them are getting drafted. Currently on the roster, you have Elijah McGuire, Bilal Powell, Ty Montgomery, Trenton Cannon. You wouldn't think all of those guys are going to break camp with the team. Do you have any sort of preference of these guys, or is it just kind of, like hand wave and figure it out when you get there?
It's really funny because I like going to Roto World and like looking up depth chart and all that, and then clicking on starters, and it's like they have RB1, RB2, like or RB1 goal line back, like the third RB, and it's Lev Bell. Normally, like you at least see like one running back in one of those slots. That is not the starting running back. And it's like it's just Lev Bell. I mean, at this point, there's no preference. I wouldn't draft any of them. Elijah McGuire has been in the system, but again, they have a new head coach and everything else. So it's not like it's a system he's used to. They might want to play Ty Montgomery. Who knows? So the only surefire is Lev Bell. We're not looking to cuff Lev Bell at this point, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, there's no definite handcuff, and when there's no definite handcuff, don't bother.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much covers the running backs. Let's move on to Sam Darnold's pass catchers. We mentioned them before. So in terms of wide receivers, we've got Robbie Anderson, 11th pick in the 6th round. That's currently wide receiver 30. And then both going undrafted, which is a little surprising to me, is our Quincy Enunwa and Jamison Crowder. So starting with Anderson, do you think he's worth it at that? And I guess that end of the season for him was insane. And that corresponded with when Darnold was going off, was Robbie Anderson was going off. And it was really the point in the season when Darnold turned a corner was when they decided, fuck it, we're just going to chuck it to Robbie Anderson a bunch. Yeah. So do you think Adam Gase sees that and continues that, or are they going to try and fuck around here?
That's the scary part. Like, I feel like Le'Veon Bell is the more definite than anything else. The wide receivers are what scare me with Adam Gase too, because obviously you've seen kind of what he did with Devontae Parker and Kenny Stills, and you just didn't know. You would think that Devontae Parker would have been the clear-cut one when he was back from his injury, and it just like ego. Who knows if Adam Gase is going to bring the same ego as he did to New York? So Robbie Anderson, obviously they built that rapport at the end, because I was someone that I scooped Robbie Anderson in a bunch of leagues last year, and Sam Darnold and him didn't really have that rapport to the second half of the year. And again, Robbie Anderson's not a high target share guy for the most part. He's just one of those like Will Fullers, or where he's catching deep bombs and all that. So I don't know, man. I think the safest wide receiver, to be honest, would be Quincy Enunwa coming out. I think that's going to be the person that's probably going to get the highest target share out of the three receivers. But you got to remember, Jamison Crowder's a pretty developed slot receiver too, and I'm interested to see where Jamison Crowder goes. So I don't know, man. I mean, Robbie Anderson, where he's going in the draft, I mean, it's a Will Fuller, Allen Robinson, Alshon Jeffrey, Christian Kirk area. If you want to, sure. I'd probably go Alshon Jeffrey or Allen Robinson before Robbie Anderson, though, this year until I know more.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there that I don't think he's my favorite out of sort of this cohort of wide receivers that's all going around the same area. So if that continues, I likely won't end up with a ton of them. The Enunwa thing, I think, is interesting because he was very productive for a brief time early in the season, but he was getting a ton of targets, and he was also playing in the slot. He was kind of filling that big slot, like the classic Marcus Colston role. And then they brought in Crowder, who you would think would now be filling that slot role. So that kicks Enunwa outside. I don't really have enough of a formed opinion on whether or not Quincy Enunwa can sustain a high target share or be productive on the outside, or whether that volume was a product of him being in the slot. So I think he's a bit risky until we get a little bit more clarity on where everyone's lining up and that sort of thing, down to down. Crowder for me is a guy who I've for the past several years, I've thought he would take the next step every single year, and he just hasn't done it. Maybe it's this year. I think I'm done betting on that for the time being.
Last year was definitely a regression, especially for Jamison Crowder, because that was especially when they didn't really have much talent around them at Redskins last year. You would thought that's where he was going to take a big step. So yeah, like I said, that maybe this year, I'm not taking a bet. I'm not going to draft him. I think if there's a last round flyer that I would take, it's going to be probably Quincy Enunwa, for the fact that he does have rapport with Darnold and is probably the safer pick. But again, this is where Adam Gase scares me. Is I don't know what his game plan is going to be with the Jets, and who knows what receiver is going to get this share.
Yeah, it's I don't know necessarily that preseason is going to outside of like who lines up where, I don't know if it's really going to answer our questions too much either. So it becomes a bit of a risky call there. In terms of tight ends, we've got Chris Herndon going 5th pick in the 14th round, tight end 22. I was a little surprised he's as low as he is, because I know, we've gone through all of the concerns with the Jets and that kind of thing, but tight ends as rookies are not productive. Mm-hmm. And Chris Herndon was productive as a rookie tight end. This is a guy who had 8 games with 4 or more targets, which, low threshold, but again, it's tight end. Overall, 56 targets, 39 catches, 502 yards, 4 touchdowns. And a lot of that came towards the second half of the season. So, I mean, it's just, I'm a little bit scared of him, but at the same time, just tight ends don't produce as rookies, and Chris Herndon did. So, I kind of buy it going into year 2. What do you think there?
No, I agree. I actually plugged him in a few times at the end of the year in a few leagues. I think it's important, too, that with the point that you said is, again, that was the second half of the season, too, where he was getting an uptick in production. Remember, Sam Darnold was a rookie last year. Herndon was a rookie last year. So they started building rapport and producing more together in the second half of the year. So now that this is going to be a second year for both of them, and they get more acclimated, I think he's probably the safest receiver on the team, to be honest.
I don't think you're wrong there. It's, with Robbie Anderson's fluctuations and just the nature of his game and the uncertainties that we said about the other two, I think you're probably right that he's going to be maybe the most solid week-to-week productive guy for them.
Yeah, I'm cool with it. I mean, listen, if you're in a deeper league or like, top 8 tight ends are off and you haven't gone, we like to play the wheel, but if you want to go with Herndon, go with Herndon. I think he has the potential to be in, a 8 to 12 spot of tight end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, if you look at other guys like going around that area, like you have Dallas Goedert, who's a backup tight end, and I know he's extremely talented, but you have Dallas Goedert going ahead of Chris Herndon. He is literally a backup. You have Noah Fant going ahead of Chris Herndon. He is a rookie who can't block. Like, you have Jordan Reed, who's made of glass, going ahead of Chris Herndon. Mm-hmm. To me, he's a better option than all of those guys.
Agreed.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, home of the brutally honest fantasy advice you've always needed.
All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for the Jets. So let's move right on to the Patriots, who had a lot less turmoil in terms of, organizational change throughout the offseason. But the big news, obviously, is that Rob Gronkowski retired. So Gronkowski leaves. We know in terms of fantasy production, he was sort of a shell of himself last year. Still an amazing blocker, still a huge on-field presence, still drew coverage. Just sort of used in a different way last year than he had been on the past. But so with Gronkowski retiring, we've got Tom Brady, the 3rd pick in the 11th round. That's quarterback 16. This is the lowest that I can remember. Tom
behind
Brady
Josh Allen.
That's pretty wild. that is crazy. Pretty wild. So with that being said, what do you think about Brady's prospects this year?
Man, I mean, listen, Brady, I think it's crazy that he's going behind Josh Allen. I don't know, man. It's the same thing. I probably won't draft Brady in any league. I think that also Tom Brady has always had higher value too. One other than him being Tom Brady and being Patriots is because of the potential of Gronkowski and how dominant, especially Gronkowski was in fantasy for quite some time. And they're looking at what their receivers are now, but man, it's still Tom Brady. You got to remember he's going to be dumping off a lot of passes still to James White. They're going to be using all their running backs that are going to be catching passes and scoring touchdowns, which is big value for Tom Brady. He still has Edelman, who shouldn't be suspended this year, and they always trying to figure a way out. So if you like Tom Brady, you can get, I guess, good value for him this year.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where we know he's old, but he's still Tom Brady. I am concerned that he will have a significant decline in volume this year. I think a lot of the offseason moves that they made are indicative of them trying to run the ball down people's throats this year. So we'll get into that a little bit as we talk about the running backs, but I'm not targeting Tom Brady. I'm fine if he ends up on one of my teams, somewhere in the 11th round or 12th round or whatever it is. I don't think he's a bad pick. I just don't really have a strong opinion on him this year.
Yeah, it is what it is. I wouldn't feel terrible if Tom Brady's on my team, but I'm not going to go out and grab him either.
Okay.
Falls in my lap. He's going to fall in my lap and I have Tom Brady.
Absolutely. So let's get on to those running backs that I just referenced. So we've got Sony Michel going 1st pick in the 5th round. That's RB25. We've got James White going 8th pick in the 5th round. That's RB27. And then also on the roster, we have Damian Harris, who is a 3rd round rookie, and Rex Burkhead. Brandon Bolden, I believe, is also there. People are actually saying they're going to carry 5 running backs into the season. Like Patriots beat writers are saying that. So that's pretty crazy. But I think, as I said, and I think the Damian Harris draft pick is a sign of this as well. Mm-hmm. I really think they're going to try and just pound the fucking ball up the middle this year. Like Sony Michel, if he's healthy, is going to be a hammer for them. And I think they drafted Damian Harris as sort of a hedge on Michel's health and also to spell Michel to keep him healthy throughout the year.
Sure.
What's your opinion on Michel at his price and just the overall strategy for the Patriots this year?
I think you did a good job explaining it. I think where Michel is falling is a good area of where he's falling. I mean, he's going right before like a Chris Carson, Kenyon Drake. I mean, these guys are, if you're worried about a Patriot running back with consistency, these are guys that are inconsistent. There's weeks where they have really good weeks and there's weeks that they don't. But what you're saying is true, where they are making some moves to look like they really are going to rely a little bit heavier on the running backs. They were high on Sonny Michel and we're a little disappointed in his offseason going into his rookie year. But he came back from his injury and he really did show a lot of fantasy production and that he really can handle the pro level of running back. So I think the value is right for Sonny Michel.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, to me, he has a very wide range of outcomes. I think if the Patriots do what they want to do, or at least what I think they want to do, there's a solid chance he ends up a top 5, top 10 back just because like he rushes for like 110 yards and like 2 touchdowns almost every week. I think there's also a chance. I mean, he just got a knee scope. He has a history of knee injuries. Like I think there's a chance that he ends up being a complete bust for you as well, but not in the on-field sense, but more just in the getting hurt sense. So right. There's a wide range of outcomes there, but he's a potential league winner in my eyes. James White, is going right after him. The guy had 123 targets last year. He had four or more targets in 15 games, 5 or more targets in 13 games, and got double-digit targets in 4 games. Do you see that sort of usage continuing?
It's tough, dude. He had a great year last year. I'll tell you what, and I normally wouldn't say it, but if there was like where in those rounds and I needed 2 like running backs back to back and Sonny Michel was there. I mean, Sonny Michel, well, I don't know, but I wouldn't even mind having a Sonny Michel and James White on my team. They're just 2 different players, but James White has been the most consistent probably the last 3 years. And obviously D.O.N. Lewis not being there really has helped James White. And you never know with Rex Burkhead with his injury statuses all the time as well. So I think James White is fine where he's going to, and I wouldn't even mind having both of them on my team if that was the case.
Yeah, I think you're pretty dead on. Like you're obviously limiting your ceiling if you do that, but like not in a substantial way. I don't think if you're in a PPR league and you're just like I'm going to soak up the entirety of the Patriots running back production, tight. Like just hope for no Harris or Burkhead touchdowns. Like that's it basically.
Pretty much.
So I mean, White is a guy that I've had in years past, and he is very very fun to own a lot of the time. So yeah. I'm totally on board with you there. We touched on Damian Harris, 3rd round rookie out of Alabama. He's sort of known as the way everyone describes him is basically like what John Gruden gets hard about, in a running back, just like tough nose, like won't go down on the first hit, like willing to like, sacrifice his body, like that kind of shit. So he seems like a banger that I think they got brought in there as sort of insurance for Sonny Michel. Do you have any strong opinions on him or Burkhead?
No, I mean, Burkhead had some fantasy value last year going into the season. I'm going to leave Burkhead and I'm going to leave him off the table. I'm just literally going to just go Sonny Michel and James White and then wait to see more during the preseason and going into this year before I do anything else.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. To me, Harris is sort of the handcuff for Michel, but I don't think he's a guy that you really need to draft unless Sonny Michel's injury concerns is sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Get more concerning. That's not the word I was looking for, but that's the general idea behind it.
That's how I was talking in my remedial English course first.
The concerns are going to get bigger. But yes, I think it's pretty safe to not draft these guys unless we get like a really, really different news from the preseason and camps than what we currently have.
Sure.
So let's move on to the pass catchers. We've got Julian Edelman. He's going as the second pick in the 4th round. That's wide receiver 15. And then the other guy getting drafted here is N'Keal Harry, who was the 32nd pick in the draft. So the last first rounder. 3rd pick in the 8th round, currently wide receiver 35. He is out of Arizona State University. Also on the team, we've got Josh Gordon and his indefinite suspension that we have no further updates on at this time. Philip Dorsett's there, Dontrell Inman is there, and Demaryius Thomas is also there. Starting with Edelman, do you like him at 402 there?
Edelman is going like right after Diggs and before like a Woods, Galladay, and Cup. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that at that point. Because you're looking at some Rams that are now going to be. You're looking actually at all three Rams receivers like directly after him.
It is funny how close those guys are all going together.
So, and then Tyler Lockett, man, just brings value to the team. But again, I would. And then Kenny Galladay, that's where it gets a little bit more inconsistent. Julian Edelman is going to be the guy. He's Brady's guy, especially in a PPR standpoint. I'm totally fine with that with Julian Edelman. If you need your second receiver at that point, I think that's solid.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, these guys have all the chemistry in the world. Double-digit targets in 6 of the 12 games last year for Edelman. Yeah. 5 or more targets in every single game. So he brings a lot of stability. I think he's going to soak up a ton of targets this year because outside of James White, they don't really have any real proven pass catchers on this team. I mean, right. I guess you could say Philip Dorsett, kind of with Tom Brady, but not really. Yeah. So, I mean, I think just out of necessity, he's going to get fed the ball in the pass game. I don't really see him underperforming that ADP unless something drastic happens. Do you have any opinions on N'Keal Harry?
What I can tell you is that he's literally where they have him, and his value is right with the rest of the rookies like DK Metcalf, Mecole Hardman. So, I mean, listen, I would say the one encouraging thing is that the Patriots obviously went after a receiver this year in the draft, first round. So they obviously like him and want to utilize him with Tom Brady. If you want to, fly on a rookie receiver at that point, sure. I don't know what the outcome will be just yet. You never know. I'm probably going to stay away, but if you're going to go with those 3 rookies, why not?
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
I'll probably go like a Geronimo Allison or Marvin Jones, like right before them, though, before I touch those guys.
Yeah, 100%. Not that I'm like an expert on rookies or scouting or anything like that, but I don't love N'Keal Harry. I thought this was kind of an overdraft for them. He's a guy who I believe he's 6'2", 228, so sort of prototypical size and speed, but just has never really been able to get separation. And from their mini camps, it seemed like that trend sort of continued. So is Tom Brady willing to throw to this rookie wide receiver who is likely not going to be open and say, go up and get it? Maybe. I'm not sure. But I'm not sure that I want to spend that high of a pick to find out. I mean, obviously we'll know a lot more in the preseason and all of that, but as of right now, I'm kind of staying away on N'Keal Harry until we get more information.
Sure.
I would assume the other outside spot is going to go to Philip Dorsett. Does that make sense to you, or do you think Demaryius Thomas or Dontrell Inman have sort of a shot there?
I would say it's Dorsett.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of my assumption. He's going undrafted. I mean, he's a guy who he's had productive games, but never really put it all together. Like, do you have any interest?
Man, I mean, listen, again, I don't know. It would be like a last round pick, really, and you could take it and it'd probably be cut. And I think he's going to be streamed in the middle of the year during buys and stuff like that, because he has had streaks with Tom Brady where he's proven to be productive. I mean, they went out and got him from the Colts. He's had flashes, but again, he's not going to be a consistent wide receiver 2 or flex for you every week, but there's some value.
Yeah, I agree with that. Unless he really shows progression, I guess, in the preseason, I won't be targeting him, but I wouldn't kill you for taking him as a last round flyer or that kind of thing.
Especially in a team league. If you're in a 14-team league or something, sure. Yeah,
absolutely. So at tight end, we've got Ben Watson, who is old as fuck and suspended. For 4 games. We've got ASJ they signed, and he got released for personal reasons. So now we are down to Matt Lacoste to start the year, who is a guy who I'm pretty sure I played in some leagues last year.
And I got a fat fucking bagel for him, dude. And I deserved all of it. It was like just 1 week where I was streaming tight ends every week, and I was like, this is literally the matchup for tight end. I'm playing Matt Lacoste. and I got the 0.0 that I deserved for it.
Hey man, we've all eaten those before. That's the game we play sometimes. That's the classic. Just like, yeah, everything lines up for CJ Uzomah this week. It's like, no, It doesn't. Everything never lines up for CJ Uzomah. But Matt Lacoste, I mean, I don't really know what to think about him. I don't think I'm going to target him in drafts unless we really see some chemistry between him and Brady in the preseason. And I mean, how much of Brady are we really going to see in the preseason? So it makes it difficult to evaluate for sure. I will be watching closely because, tight end's a tough position. And if you can get an edge there, it certainly helps. But then even if he does hit, like, you get Ben Watson back in 4 games.
I was reading though, like with Matt Lacoste, like, he's never he's been in league like 4 seasons, I believe. And he had never appeared in more than 3 games for any team in a season. So, last year he played a little bit more, but I mean, he only caught 24 passes. It was nothing like I don't know. I think the fun fact of this all is the other tight end that could be fighting for the spot is Ryan Izzo, who's from our hometown and played for Pope John. So that'd be cool. Like if he just, won over the spot of Matt Lacoste until old ass Ben Watson comes in.
That's the guy who went to FSU, right?
Yeah, he went to Pope John, which was our parochial county high school.
We didn't go there, public school.
We all love to hate Pope John. And then he went to FSU. So he was out on IR last year, so he's going to be fighting for a spot. But obviously with tight ends being down, it's possibly a good opportunity for him. That'd be sweet to play him in the fantasy lineup one week.
Yeah, absolutely. Draft the guy who went to our rival school but is from our town.
From our town.
Or don't. It's probably smarter to not do that, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yep.
All right, Don, I think that's going to do it for the Pats. Before we let you guys go, we do have Ed's question of the week, and that's, are you comfortable leaving the draft with Sam Darnold as your only quarterback?
Stream. But yeah. If you're leaving with Sam Darnold at the draft, then you're just planning on streaming like weekly.
Yeah, totally. Like I think they're playing Buffalo week 1, so like I don't think that's a terrible matchup. I mean, I'm comfortable leaving drafts like with like no quarterbacks, so I'm not the correct person to ask in this situation.
I would say there's if for the leagues that or people that do value quarterbacks higher than we do, because we are on literally one spectrum of this, is that no, I think there's enough depth that you don't have to leave your draft with Sam Darnold as your only quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Pull on a Phillip Rivers if you're gonna put Sam Darnold on your team.
Yeah, if you're gonna wait till like super late in a draft to get quarterbacks, like Darnold, Lamar Jackson, cool quarterback pairing.
Sure.
Do something like that. It's fine. I wouldn't necessarily leave with him as my only guy. Unless you really think he's going to fuck up Buffalo week 1. But even then, like, I'm not trying to stream the guy with the new head coach that we have all these concerns about week 1.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is literally just don't know with Adam Gase, man.
Yeah. So I guess the answer is no, for the most part.
But I'm looking forward to the hoedown throwdown between Darnold and Josh Allen week 1.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. Just both of them fucking slinging the pig all over the place. Yeah, that should be a good time. Well, Don, I think that's going to wrap it up. This was a lot of fun, and we will be back with part 2. So keep an eye out for that. But you got anything to leave the people with here?
No, guys, I'm glad to be back here, and I'm glad we could start off with the Jets as my first time back. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, for Don, I am Walsh. Later, podcast.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.